Yo, this is Alup. You got pretty big balls to watch Torian's YouTube videos.
Right, this is going to be another of my monthly Patreon donator discussions. Got two people you've seen before. Got Jerky's Minion here, pretty much regular on the show at this point in time. Zen's done quite a few of them as well. We even did that one where it was just the two of us, much like Will Smith and his son in that song from the 90s. And we've got a new challenger. Got Andreas Snazore Westerlund, who you may have heard before because his name is very distinctive and he's been mentioned many times in the By the Numbers podcast shout outs and my own shout out. So sadly though, you have been overtaken because now all shout outs are dominated on my channel by the guy called Butt Pounder 420. We all know it. And listen, obviously it's a bit immature, a little bit childish to call himself that, but you know what, he wins, because as soon as I say that, everyone knows immediately they're thinking about that and not any of the other names mentioned. So, you know, step your game up, you know, up your level.
What, I gotta change my name?
As far as I can tell, yeah.
After 11 years? Nah, no way.
You can't really be mad with a name like that.
No.
I know, exactly. So here's the thing, Andreas, what we'll do is, since you are new to this, we'll let you pick a topic. Is it like, first of all, give people some insight. Like, what games generally do you follow the most?
Well, the only games I kind of follow is CSGO and Dota 2.
Okay.
Been a bit busy, haven't been able to follow much of anything lately, to be honest. But yeah, try to keep in touch with somewhat what's happening in those games at least.
Okay. What was the last big CSGO tournament you watched?
The Major.
Ah, fair enough. Okay. At least we have like a baseline of where you're at then. Right. Is there any news or any big topics in CS that you're interested in? It could be any topic you want.
Well, I got a topic that came into my mind earlier, just when I was listening to By the Numbers. Just how, your thoughts on how basically childish so many pro players are, with how it's all about me, I am the skill player, skill is everything.
Sure.
No one is actually willing to sacrifice, if you want to use that word, a bit to actually improve. You might take a hit, a couple of tournaments, but no one's going for the long run. Everyone, it's
Sure.
to focus on themselves, I think. No true work morality, you want to call it that?
Sure. You've unintentionally, by the way, just hit on the most Swedish characterization of team sports there, by the way, because in case you aren't aware, that is actually famously within the Swedish scene, the thing that they tend to emphasize as a character aspect more than anything else is actually, believe it or not, just agreeableness. It's like getting along with your team, being a guy who's not too selfish. That's the reason why, you know, Makaleli, Modi, people like these have had a lot of problems over the years in CS, whereas if people want to know why someone like Exist generally doesn't get booted out of teams no matter how he plays, it's because he's very easy to get along with. It's because he's a guy who knows the pecking order. He knows he knows, for example, in a scene that actually admires qualities like that, like being unselfish, etc. When you're unselfish, the teammate you helped out doesn't do like he might if he was an American player, like, well, I got 3 kills, where the fuck was yours? Like, you know, that sort of stupid angle. He's like, he understands, like, oh, well, I was able to get those kills because someone helped me and the team structure exists. So, like, generally, I think some of these problems, unfortunately, are just a factor of youth. The fact that so many players are so young relative to, you know, what a real sportsman's age would be. Because obviously, when everyone raves, like, oh my God, Forrest is 30 or whatever he is at this point, it's like, yeah, that would actually be not even an old player for a football player. Like, you know, that's just a reasonable age for a top pro player. So, youth is definitely a factor because, you know, along with youth comes being inexperienced or not having had the time to learn from your mistakes and go through things. So I would actually contrast it with youth outside of even esports, because when I think to myself, when I was a boy, and every boy in England obviously wants to be a football player, and not just a football player, they all want to be the striker, and they all want to be the striker who scores the winning goal in the game. And so because that's like the initial inspiration or the drive to want to be a player, it means that everyone, when they're really young, when they do like the school tryout for the team, everyone goes, and they used to actually let you list when you would write your name down, like sign up for the trial. They would say like, and what position do you prefer? And I'm not joking. This fucking sheet with the names on was just like it was like 100% attacking positions. So like worst case scenario, the guy put himself as like left winger, you know. And even then he probably only did that because he was cynical. And I was like the smart kid who was like, I'm not going to be able to be the striker. Everyone else is right-footed. I can vaguely kick on my left foot, so I'm going to say left wing because that's like the smart guy. The dumbass is the kid who like wasn't even good at football. He's like, I want to be the star centre forward, sir. It's like, well, we'll see how this works out. You can have your trial. And the best part about this is the kicker of the story, is I remember when I went to these trials for the school teams that you would get players who in the trial, they would let play as a striker for like 5 minutes, you know, and they would score 3 or 4 goals. And these kids literally thought in their brain, well, I'm definitely on the team, aren't I? I've just scored 4 goals. They didn't understand that, like, in the trial, all they were trying to assess was things like your basic skill set, you know, what type of a player you are. And so what they didn't understand was, you know, there might actually have been a really skilled striker who they already knew from some past team, like, oh, he's actually pretty good. And they might have even told him, oh, can you just play left wing in this game because we don't really have anyone who can do that. And when he then fulfilled that role and did a good job, he was on the school team later, you know. So the point I'm getting to here is, unfortunately, I feel like it's the same for players. Like if you ever go and watch matchmaking or play a game or play Face It or something, everyone thinks they're the star player. Everyone thinks they're the player who should get the orb. They should get the resources. They should get to go in after the other person. That's why no fucker will go in when you get a really bad game, you know, and you're all just sat outside every site on Inferno waiting for the clock to run down or some magical duel to appear. So unfortunately, there is definitely a lot of that. And the sad thing is, because the pro scene is so young, and then a side point I would throw in that doesn't relate to sports is esports has another problem, which is I actually believe it will always be slightly skewed young because since the physical component isn't so big, you can be the best in the world with a child's body. Like you literally can be. You can be 15 years old and be the best in the world. So unfortunately, it also means that if you are 15, you can literally just immediately shoot to the top of the scene and you can be playing next to Nico and Forrest and the rest of those guys tomorrow. So if you add all these factors together, it's not really that much of a surprise that even, you know, top pros, because, you know, they might be 20 years old, have these very immature ideas or don't understand the premise of what a teammate can add to their game beyond fragging. So sadly, even though you might not want to hear it, it is the case that even at the pro level, a lot of pros are judging other pros on things sometimes as stupid as like how good their aim is. Like I've even had pros where they'll shit talk another player and I'm like, yeah, he is a pretty good player though, isn't he? And they'll be like, what are you talking about? Didn't you see that clip where, you know, he missed the deagle shot in the back of someone's head? And I'm like, yeah, but what the fuck does that have to do with anything? I'm like, he's fucking boosted. He's not even good. It's like, and you have to sometimes almost pinch yourself and go, you're in one of the best teams in the world. What the fuck are you why are you talking like we're in matchmaking now? And you're like, it's like they're literally, that's why I always say that joke on By the Numbers. Like a lot of top pros are just noobs with really good aim. Like they have sort of that same stupid mentality. So what do some of you guys think? What would you put it down to?
People are less inclined to play like aggressive roles such as the entry fragger for the various obvious reason. People these days look too fucking much at stats.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fair enough.
And even going up, like if you're, you know, semi-pro, almost the only way to get into a pro team is to actually have really good stats. So
yes,
if you're a really good support player, and I guess the extreme of this is the lack of in-game leaders that you've discussed a bunch of times in
sure.
It's like it's the same principle to the extreme. It's like, why would you sacrifice yourself and take hours studying the game if then you won't be noticed by the top team? It's not like they have scouts asking everyone. They just look at a really long list of KDAs and pick the top ones.
Yeah, actually, come to think of it, that reminds me, there was a point I should have made to sort of round out the whole example I gave, which is the reason I gave the football analogy. I forgot this point, actually. The reason I gave the football analogy is because if you know everyone started and said, I want to be the striker, well, then how in the world do you ever end up with any defenders? How do you ever get a goalie? Well, the logical reason that you should be able to guess based on this is when you don't make it as a striker, but the coach noticed you had some good skills and was like, your passing's all right. Well, guess what? You're now a central midfielder. And then some other guy who played 5 minutes as a defender and he wasn't good enough as a striker, but you know what? He had some fitness and he had some pace. That guy gets told, we can be on the school team if you're willing to play centre-back or whatever. And the idea is, Coaching structure is what forms you into the roles and then develops you within those roles. Now, that's the problem, is in esports like CSGO, we only have coaching at the very top level. And I have to tell you, quite sadly, even most of those coaches don't have a lot of control. Like, yeah, people like Zonic and maybe Zeus and some of these guys do. But beyond some of those names, even people you've heard of as big name coaches, they're really just analysts. They watch the demos and they tell the player what they've seen. And if the player's an in-game leader do it, that's pretty much up to them. Like, the orgs don't even often punish players if they don't. So sadly, what we lack actually in esports that real sports has is like the whole coaching structure where you can't get to a competent sports level without being coached by someone, you know, whether it's a school coach or a club or regional area. In the UK, we call them counties, states in America, and obviously college, and then the pro level. The idea is, way before you get to the pro level, you've been coached heavily by people in your role, in your basic skills, in mentality to the game. And because we lack that, I actually feel like there are tons of players who we probably never got to see at the pro level, who would have been amazing as some sort of a supportive element or an entry fragger. Likewise, there's probably top pros right now who don't know they're doing the wrong role. Like they're just trying to be, you know, the best player on some not that good team. Whereas if they could adapt their game, they'd probably be the one of the best supports in the world on one of the best teams in the world. Because actually, the sad thing is, if you look on the pro level, a lot of the players just out of choice had to make that decision. So someone like MSL sat around and thought to himself one day, well, I'm never going to get a job as a support player on the best Danish team on, but if I'm an in-game leader, well, we need some of those. NBK, who, for people who don't know, was legitimately one of the most skilled French players, one day just decided, one thing we lack in our teams is supportive elements. So I will be the hard support. I'll be the almost like the 5 position player in Dota, to give the analogy there, as long as it means, you know, everyone else gets the resources, everyone else gets a level up. And the logic they're using as well is like, because I have skill, I'll also be sort of a bit OP as a support player. You know, I'll be much better than the rest of them. So I think that's definitely part of it as well. Like, I do think if put it this way, if CSGO teams were worth them just the 5-man lineup, you know, $100 million or something. At that point, I feel like we would get to the point where coaching would start to overlap in this way. Because I feel like that's actually the area going forwards that makes it tough, because it's so hard to recruit players if everyone's the same sort of crop of player as well. Like, where do you find those players? At the moment, they just have to figure it out themselves, which is not really ideal, because the concept of being coached as a kid is, as a kid, you have no fucking clue what role you should play. You might think you do, but that's just an idea, isn't it? Whereas the guy who's your coach, even if he's a bad coach, he probably still has a better idea than you. Like, he can probably still coach some fundamental things. So I think that's just a thing that's lacking at the moment. And then in terms of like the selfish mentality, some of that's not even just youth. Some of that's just like, if you did a job for only a year and you only got the job in your mind because you're really skilled, and you think you're getting paid only because you're really skilled, then you might judge everyone else in the world on that criteria, you know.
True.
What about another topic? Does anyone else have another one?
Let's see. The format was decided for one of the CSGO tournaments, and it was apparently going to be round robin again.
Let me think. What was that? What tournament is he talking about? Do you know? I know ESL Pro League is using round robin, but that's in the groups.
Yeah, I'm not sure anymore which tournament it was, but that's like one that triggers me to a certain extent. It kills me inside.
That's really bad.
I mean, it has to be a thing about scheduling, basically. From their side, they think it's easier to schedule the event.
Sure.
It might.
I can't figure out any other reason.
It's also because I'll play devil's advocate. The main reason people tend to like round robin is because what they always say, and I won't editorialize this at all, is they say it's the most fair format because everyone plays the same number of games and you play everyone in the group. And so the notion is, you know, I don't, like, this is the part where I disagree, obviously, is I don't really know why it's, like, unfair for me to get out of a group or lose in a group without playing all people in the group. I don't really know what the problem is with that, you know? And that's also but the reason why you can tell people do buy into this is that's the reason it was actually easier to sell people on Swiss system than it was on best of threes. Because the idea was in the Swiss system, hey, you can play anyone now. You can play anyone in the tournament. So that was actually a very easy sell to players. So there's that aspect. Let me think. What would the other positives be? I mean, like you say, in theory, scheduling, like knowing which game is going to be played when, because obviously in a GSL system, you don't really know who's going to play in the winners match yet, do you? See, even the team can't schedule. Whereas in round robin, you know exactly when your game in theory is, you know exactly who you're playing. Like these are factors that to a fan are inconsequential. To a pro player or a tournament organizer, they have some merit. You know, I would just say generally, most of the arguments, it's actually sadly the same in most areas of format. It's just that I don't have to get mad anymore because if you notice, I've sort of won. Like most of the tournaments now use formats I like and that are really good. And part of the reason why, by the way, I think it's an exaggeration, is whenever a tournament runs a format I like, I give it a lot of fanfare. I praise it a lot, you know, because if you're not aware, most human and animal studies show that praising someone for something they did that you want them to do is way better at encouraging that behavior than like punishing them when they do what you don't want to do. Like that tends to be a more effective strategy. So like a lot of the reasoning given for formats over the years are things that they're only like good points in a vacuum. The problem I have is if you ever ran a tournament, you'd see all the flaws. Like the obvious flaw around robin is you always get ties. I mean, you don't have to, but you very often do. Because what people forget is it doesn't even have to be a 3-way tie. Even if there's a 2-way tie, and even if they're the two teams who were already qualified, you still have to do a tiebreaker because someone has to be the first seed. Someone has to get that playoff seed. So, unfortunately, I think it's a bad format for that reason because you're always going to end up either with a tiebreaker that isn't a game played out, therefore it's something random like, you know, round difference, number of maps, one if it's a better 3 tournament, or you're going to have to play an actual game out, which, to tie into what you said, Andreas, then takes away what you benefited from the scheduling because now you have to play an extra game. So, I agree. I think there's a lot of flaws in it. In fact, I generally think it's probably the worst format, but I can vaguely see why tournament organizers get dragged into it. I just don't understand now.
It was actually decided by the players because they got to vote for it.
There's another classic problem. So that was the reason why back in EPL and ESL a couple of years ago they had round robin, is because it was actually players who picked it, believe it or not. They picked that over other options. So
fun fact, I mean, and afterwards...
Players don't always do what's in their own best interest, let's put it that way.
Yeah, but afterwards they complained about it.
Yeah.
Strange. You
That's
guys
also
picked
a classic
the format
move.
and then you want to fucking go back at it. Like, why?
Yeah, that is also a classic move.
Yeah,
it's like the person who's like, oh, why have they fucking nerfed this champion? Then they buff it. Oh, it's too strong now. It's like, oh, bloody get out of my face. I can't handle this. Come on, Zen, what were you going to say?
I mean, in Blast Pro Series, they even play the games at the same time. They just want to get the thing done in one day. That's the only reason. I mean, if this was like the international or something like that, okay, I want to see everyone, but then no one really gets eliminated. But in this case, sure, it's a tournament with 5 of the top 5 teams in Counter-Strike, and only 2 go to the final. The other, you see them again. Like, it's the worst possible tournament to do something like this, especially now that Astralis is basically only attending these things. It's just ridiculous. That it's only in tournaments like this that I'm getting the good matchups.
Well, they made it that format to be like separated from all the rest and like have their own very little niche thing. But yeah, as you say, like when teams start skipping all the rest just to attend one thing, and it's coincidentally by one of their owners. Strange.
Yeah, but
so almost as you were pushing towards exclusivity at one point, right?
If it was 1 or 2 or 3 throughout the year, that would be fine. But now there's so many.
It's 19 or something.
It's just too many. It's just too many of these stupid tournaments. It's just, I don't know. I really, really don't know what's the way forward, because they seem to be, continue doing it. So they think it's a good idea. Somehow it's working for them. I'm sure the guy who came up with it got promoted. So it's not.
Problem is, it is successful. Like, if you ignore what we as fans think, if you look at like the setup to sell to a tournament or like some country that wants you to host it and a guy who's going to buy in, I'm sure it is successful. It looks like a good format, and for the most casual fan, for the person in the audience, they enjoy it. They like the shootouts and all that sort of guff. The problem is, if you're a hardcore fan, it's not going to be as cool. And like you said, there's a place for it in the circuit. But first of all, if it's ever taken away the best team in the world, that's already going to be an issue. And then secondly, if it's getting in the way of the biggest tournaments, that's also a problem. Because the idea is, I don't mind someone doing any tournament as long as it's like we get to keep all of the tournaments we have now, yeah. Yeah, it's just something additional. Well, then who cares? It's like female tournaments. Like, the main reason I don't really get why people still complain about female tournaments is, as soon as you find out that information that I've mentioned many times, which is that they are not funded from the same source as the male tournament, then who cares? It's just another tournament. It's like saying, right, would you like me to be able to go where I want to have dinner tonight? And you being like, no, because I want to go to Lorenzo's and have Italian food. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going with you though. I'm going to go somewhere else. Like, no, but I think people should only go to Lorenzo's tonight. It's like, that would actually be a weird opinion to have, right? Because it's like, well, no, you can go to Lorenzo's and I can go wherever I want. Like, that's cool. But yeah, if you said I want to go to Lorenzo's tonight, and I was like, no, you have to come with me to this fish and chip shop. I'm just having the cheapest food possible. Yeah, that you'd have grounds to then be like, I don't fucking like fish and chips. I don't want that. So I think that's half the problem with the Blast Pro Series, unfortunately. Is in a weird way, they're almost like a victim of their own success. Because if it was a side tournament, then yeah, it wouldn't be a big deal. I wouldn't complain.
I think no one would. It's just another tournament we can watch. But it takes away from so many other possible great tournaments we can have on those dates. And then, as you say, it takes away the best team currently. I don't know, man. Like,
and even just the fact that Astralis, they just refuse to say that, yeah, we're skipping the event. If there was, yeah, we're just saying
due
that
to illness, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's pretty damn obvious they're just skipping out. But if you say, yeah, we're skipping out because contract, blah blah blah, fine. I don't think that's a good idea, but fine, you do you. It's a business. I can't really blame you that much. But it's just no. We love you, fans. No. Come on. You're just pissing everyone off instead. No one believes it anyway, so.
Well,
yeah.
A few people believe it, but yeah. Sure.
A lot of people bite the bullshit. Like,
yes.
Yum, 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 yum.
Hopefully people don't believe it. Yeah, I agree. Like, some smart cats don't. No, half the problem with that is just like that. Unfortunately, that's also a thing that tilts me in the modern day. Is people, for some naive reason, I guess this would be an experience again, a lot of people obviously work in marketing and stuff, they're brand new to esports, or they're brand new to the job, maybe they only did it a couple of years, or maybe they only just came fresh out of a university degree, so they're basically a rank beginner, because a lot of people seem to naively think that marketing just involves lying at all times and saying everything's brilliant, which I don't really get, because actually there's plenty of companies and brands that you can see that sometimes when they apologize or they admit they fucked up, sometimes it strengthens your brand. Like, it makes your customer base think, oh yeah, this is the sort of company I want to be involved with. Yeah. Whereas actually, if I feel like you're saying here, as though someone's basically, if not lying, just sort of like going out of their way to fuck with the semantics of the wording, to be like, oh, but when I said skip, what I meant by skip is like, shut the fuck up. Like, the whole point of communication is to get the idea across to my brain as complete as possible, not trick my brain into thinking something else and going, what? You thought skip meant we weren't attending the event? Like, like, they go too far on that. So that what they don't realize is, even though, to tie in what Jerky said, obviously it does work on some fans, I actually get a feeling this last incident is pretty telling, because anyone who imagines, by the way, like, I'm sure I had an influence on the community making videos and talking about by the numbers, that brought the topic to the forefront, but I can't make people think a certain way. Like, no matter what, because that's like what's funny is the people who are haters of mine and obsessively post all the negative comments, remember, everyone's the hero in their mind. They're not actually a hater in their mind. What they are is a freedom fighter, and they're fighting against the oppressive totalitarian state of Thorin fanboys. To them, everyone who agrees with me is a fanboy, and they're the only true rebel who dares like speak out against me. So people like that always try to make it sound like everyone just believes everything I'll say, which is like, I can just tell you from my own life experience, that's not even vaguely the way things are. But what I would say is this. I didn't really make all this backlash against Astralis and Refresh. Maybe I stoked it a little bit. But a lot of that is real, genuine community backlash. What happened is people got sick of the best of ones. People got sick of not seeing Astralis at tournaments. People got sick of the idea of like, wait a minute, is it going to be like this the whole way? We're going to have even more of it. I think what happened was it was the straw that broke the camel's back. People finally just got to the point where they were like, this is annoying me now, actually. I was willing to overlook some of these things before when it was new, or it was just cool to see the teams play, or enjoyed the show match. But now that people are starting to think of it the way they think of every other big tournament, unfortunately the flaws are revealed in the same way as, you know, sometimes you're up for trying a new format and then you find out like, actually it's got a few flaws I hadn't really thought through, like, you know, the obvious one being Swiss system. It actually took a while till we realised that it's pretty much a feature of Swiss system with no seeding that you will get fucked up matches. Like, it's almost impossible to avoid it. So when I just thought at first, it's just a one-off. When you realise that happens every time, then you start to think, maybe I'm not a bigger fan of Swiss system unseeded, actually. Maybe it's not that good. Right, what about this? I'll pick a topic. Let me think of something that's in the news at the moment. Let's see if there's like a good move here. I've got a question for you, actually. So, being as we're not going to see this lineup play, actually, because I was just looking at the news that says that because Xantares had a visa issue for IEM Sydney, Legia, who's like technically on the coaching staff and obviously used to play in the team a long time ago, is going to stand in for Big. So that's not the topic, right? I mean, that's pretty obvious analysis there. Who gives a fuck that Legia wasn't even good when he was a pro? But my question is this. What do people actually think of the Big team? Because even though the results are bad this year, like, I actually find them one of the most confusing teams in the scene because I still feel like they have some good pieces. So I actually don't really, like, I can't really put my finger entirely on what's wrong with the squad.
Well, I don't really know what's wrong with the squad either, but I think, at least what people think about them, they're definitely fallen out. Most people are getting, well, seeing them as a lower tier team. Well, they had a run at, was it ESL Birmingham?
Cologne.
Yeah, Cologne, sorry. Where
Birmingham's daughter. I wish we had Birmingham in CSGO, mate. But I don't think that's going to happen. But
yeah, that was Snowed, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. But at that point, yeah, most people seem to see them as a top 5 team almost. But then
at that tournament, they looked like it, sure.
Yeah, for sure. But they had was after Smooya benched himself. I think it was after around that time. They absolutely felt the shit, and people gave up. Basically, just started to say that. I think most of them that it was just a fluke. They had a good strat. Everyone figured out the strat, and now they're back to where they were. I think there's some truth to that, to be honest. And now they have some couple of roster issues. So that's basically the same thing that many teams have gone through at that point.
Sure.
Might just be the non-cohesion between them, because at first you had 4 people and then you had Smooye, who was a star player, like added into that roster. He popped off massively in Cologne, right?
Yeah,
sure.
He was just feeding off the crowd, like going ham every fucking game. And then at the finals, when they died down, like Big died a horrible death to Na'Vi. So after he benched himself, like, I think certain people lost a little bit of their motivation, and now they can't seem to get that back. With Xantares in there, they should actually be a good team, as long as they listen to Gob B his strats, or if Gob B gets the strats down again for them, as well as the map pool. Like, certain maps have been removed now, even though they have not been played in a tournament yet, I believe. Anyone know?
No clue.
I think what you're referring to was in the update. I think they just changed some of the maps.
So that's also going to impact Big, how they might be able to shake up the scene again if they get an advantage on one of the new maps, right?
I think those are just for like the casual play though. Like, I don't think they're coming into the actual competitive pool yet. I know they did like updates.
They don't come.
No, the new maps are just for casual players.
Yes.
Oh, thank God.
What do you think, Zen?
Didn't they also have that language problem where they were thinking of speaking German than English than whatever? I think they'll have similar problems to MIVR, where it's like it's just too many years speaking in German, and then now we have to do English because of this guy, but his English is shit, so even that is difficult.
That's actually the weirdest part about it, is because the thing they always used to say when Smooya was in the team was like, we'd prefer to speak in German, which, by the way, was actually just bullshit. What they really meant was like, we can't admit it because obviously why the fuck would you ever say this publicly? But Smooya is fucking annoying and he's pissing us off. So it's like, that's a clever way to, I mean, if you just say like, new rule, everyone speaks in German. Oh, Smooya, forgot about shit. Oh, it's too late now.
If you want someone that speaks German, get Chris J. He's been playing in German teams for how long now?
Well, that's what's unfortunate is they had two options they could have gone with. One was the guy that everyone always mentions, Sirison from Alternate Attacks, who is an All-Per, is German, obviously played in the German scene, must know a whole bunch of them. I'm not sure why they didn't go for him. I believe it's because that was the timing of when they initially went for Smooya. And then actually, I don't know how much I can say about this, but as far as I know, they were trying to get Chris J when he was benched from Mouse. It's just unfortunately, Big isn't a team with loads of money. Chris J obviously ended up coming back to Mouse anyway, and I think he only would have taken that offer if he basically didn't have many other ones. Because the thing is, I think he would have been up for it. Like, I know he actually reveres Godby, has a very high regard for him, but no one really wants to take a step down competitively and take a pay cut and, you know, all these factors, because if you know the way the pro scene works, that's like a recipe for just disappearing completely. Like, just look at someone like Kirby now. Like, who's going to pay mega bucks to sign him? Doesn't matter if he got good again, you know. Like, it'll be a while before he can sort of restore his status in the eyes of the other people. So I'm kind of with you. Like, I actually do think they would benefit a lot more from speaking only in German. It's just that obviously recruiting Zantares doesn't help you on that front. Like,
also helps you on reaction times. Like, it takes your brain, like, just that snap second, right, to like transfer it from like your non language to your official one that you always use. And that might just be like that crucial split second that you need to make a decision in the game that gets you killed or you get the kill, right?
Yeah, and that goes both ways. First, you gotta translate it in your head if you're gonna say it, and then the other person's gonna translate it as well. So
yes,
a lot of time wasted.
Especially because the thing that seems so wasteful about not speaking in German is, come on, if we're trying to be a really tactical team, and especially because Godby, one of the things he's famous for is like, even though he does have like a deep playbook and runs a lot of scrims stuff, he's one of those guys who wants, like, part of why he sets up a really deep playbook of tactics is he wants to be able to switch them up if he wants to on the fly. Like, if he reads the game and sees like, this isn't working out well, like, I'm going to call something different. Well, that's exactly where you'd want everyone to be on the exact same page, speaking the same language, with the same terminology, same call out, everything the same. So there's lightning quick communication. You can just react immediately. Because I do feel like the problem I have with this team is, because they do lack a little bit of firepower, at least compared to the top teams, you've got to make up the edge somewhere. So if you're giving up another edge elsewhere in communication, and then you're giving up an edge with, for example, Zantares has never played with this sort of a team before, all these little edges are going to add up. You know, eventually you might be just giving away like 10% of your potential, 15% of your potential. So at that point in time, you're going to already have to max everything else out. Everyone else is going to have to be hitting headshots. Everyone else is going to be on top of their game, playing in peak form. So it's going to be too much. Because actually, Zen, do you know much? Because one of the things I always find interesting is because so little stuff gets out of the Brazilian scene, gets translated. What was the sentiment when those players, Stewie and Tarek, were in MIBR? Like, what was it actually? Was there any info on streams or interviews that implied that there were problems all along, or they didn't ever like get going or anything?
Unfortunately, I cannot help you. I mostly say MIBR for the memes. I actually don't.
Fair enough.
Like them.
I just wondered because I know sometimes when those people stream, they actually are a lot more forthright than they are on Twitter or whatever. Yeah. Which, although, by the way, the hilarious part of that is that's one of the reasons why Brazilian fans go even harder, because they'll always say stuff like, "Oh, Fallen on his stream was saying he hates Storm." But it's like, I've always said this in the past. I don't give a fuck what Fallen says to anyone else. As long as he smiles, is polite to me, does that interview and shuts the fuck up, he can do whatever he wants. He can say anything he wants to anyone else. You can lie to... Go and tell your mum that I'm a bad guy if you want. Don't give a fuck. As long as you still got that respect for me, boy, that's all I care about. That's all that matters.
I do know that they were relatively less focused on streaming while they were with Stu and Tarek, and that they were the ones that they did have was where they were in a team house, right? They were preparing, and they had a camera, and you could see, was it Yanko with them back then?
Okay, yeah, right? Should have been.
Fallen, and they were going over a strat book, and then they had like every person come into the room separately, it's like with them, and then set them in front and started like taking in the book, right?
Oh, okay.
So you could see that on stream, you just couldn't hear it, right? But
Sure.
at certain points, you could see certain people get agitated. That's all I'm gonna say.
I would argue that going from German to English might be easier than Portuguese to English. Even though the German have accents, it's still pretty clear what they're saying.
Was machen Sie now?
Whereas in Portuguese, I mean, not too many people, especially from Brazil, have fluent English. So it might be harder. It might be harder.
You are right. Yeah, that does make sense. Because that was the other part I wondered about is, because for me, one of the biggest aspects that people overlooked about that move when Xantares actually joined Big in the first place was that Space Soldiers is nothing like Big as a team. In fact, they're almost like polar opposites.
Yeah,
so
they were very headshot heavy. They were going like full,
exactly,
just aiming, punching their way through.
Like you see in sports, there's players who are really good on one team, and then they go to the wrong sort of team. Like they don't know at the time, because remember, every top player always thinks, I'm very like. If you ever asked someone, there's no one who describes themselves, I'm a very one-dimensional player who can only do this. No, everyone. If you hear them talk about themselves, they're all fucking versatile, and they can all play every role, and they're all adaptive, and they're all intelligent. And they're all mad delusional, basically. So as a result, there's a lot of even sports stars have made the wrong decision completely and gone to teams where it's like, that makes no sense, dude. Like, think about what your strengths are. Like, they do the opposite. Like, probably the best example ever would be, like, you have to be a basketball fan to know this one, but people might vaguely know it, is about 10 years ago, Shaquille O'Neal joined the Phoenix Suns. Now, the reason why that is a mad move is because, you know what? Phoenix Suns at the time were one of the better teams. Shaquille O'Neal was still a pretty good player. He was past his prime. He was still a pretty good player. But the reason why that makes no sense is because famously, he, at that point in his career especially, wasn't like at his peak of athleticism. Like, his whole thing was like half-court basketball where like, I stand below the basket, you throw me the ball, I do a one-on-one move and I score a basket, right? Well, the famous thing about this team he was joining, the Phoenix Suns, is they were the most up-tempo team in the NBA, and they used to literally run back on defense and then run forwards, and they famously had a system called 7 seconds or less, where the idea is as soon as we have the ball, within 7 seconds, I want us to be in a set and take a shot. Well, as a result, that is literally the opposite of what Shaq wants to do. He doesn't want to run up and down, and he's never going to get a half-court set where they take time and wait and throw the ball into it. So what he didn't seem to think through was like, even if this team wins, it's not going to be with me doing anything. I'm going to be like a fucking side guy who's doing nothing. If anything, I'm going to be the missing piece that never, like, I'm going to be like the part in the jigsaw puzzle that doesn't even fit. It's from a different jigsaw puzzle. So if that can happen to sports pros, no wonder it can happen to actual pro players in games. So you've seen already. I mean, actually, I already alluded to him earlier. This is basically the mistake Kirby made. Kirby thought, if I go to, because what people don't know, I'll give you some little insight that's not known publicly. And here's the thing, I wasn't told it like privately by someone secretly, so I can reveal it. I just heard it through the grapevine like everyone else. Basically, Kirby has a fucking sick contract in North. Like, I believe he actually makes more, at least at the time, than he would have made in Astralis. So that's part of why they were able to lure him away, because they kind of lured him away like, in Astralis, you're just another player. And in fact, at the time, he wasn't doing that well. Why not come to our team and be the player? And obviously, in his mind, he was thinking, well, when I was with MSL, I was in sort of like career form. I was the man. I was the best player. That's how I got into Astralis. So if I go to North, and, at the time, the lineup actually looked good, even though it ended up not being good. He was thinking, right, it's going to be a good lineup. I'm the star player, got a sick contract. There's loads of good reasons to go. What he didn't think through was, why am I in not good form in Astralis at the moment? What does that say for my career? What else could go wrong in North? So even though staying with Astralis also might not have been the right answer, obviously all the things he imagined would be great about being in North never really came to play. And obviously the saddest thing is he's actually never been the star player of this team. So even that part, the almost consolation of it, never worked out.
And what's worse is Astralis became number one.
Yes. That's
and
obviously
Magix took his position.
Yes. Of course.
We almost had forgotten about him, and then he came back and became a superstar.
Yep. Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I actually think that's a problem for a lot of teams. I mean, to tie back into the whole MIBR topic, Stu2K has done this a bunch of times now. So the same thing, he's now come into Team Liquid. And even though, listen, they're a pretty good team, so I won't say it's the wrong decision right now, it looks as though at times he's playing supportive roles again or supportive positions, etc. And you look at his numbers, the numbers are still just as bad as they were in MIBR. It's like, this is another example of a player where it's because here's the thing, when they say I'm versatile, they're not 100% wrong. What they mean is, you know, last time in a game where I swapped a position with a guy or I played this spot because, you know, so we had a stand in, it was fine. So I can do it. It's like, that's different from that being your job every day. Like that, the reason why I have a lot of respect for people like Taco is a great example, because I actually don't think Taco's a very skilled player, but he completely understands what his role in a team is. And every day he can come in, bottom frag, be the one who loses the 1v. Like, listen, think about when they're at their prime. He's watching everyone else in his team win all these 1v1s, frag out, get MVP awards, get praise, and he's never getting any of that praise because rightfully so. He's not that skilled a player. He's not a guy who's going to give the highlights. But he understood and had the mentality of like, but if I do my part, I get to win the championship. If I do my part, maybe that's even necessary for one of those other players to do that amazing shit they're doing. So it's really rare you get a player who actually kind of understands his limitations. That's half the problem. A lot of them understand their strengths, but so few of them actually understand their weaknesses. And so, yeah, just unfortunately, again, you see players like, because obviously the thing is, if Stewie 2K was in a different team and in a different role, I've no doubt he'd be a very good player again. Don't see any reason why not. He's got the skill set for it.
100%. I think Stewie's a guy you just need to leave off the chain instead of like trying to put him in somewhere and slot him in. Just a guy you got to let him do his own thing. Much like Simple.
Yeah, I 100% agree. They have their own style, which they have practiced and been successful with. So there's no reason to. I mean, you don't have to create a team around them. Just give them a bit space.
Yes.
To actually use their skill set.
Yeah, actually, that's also a problem some players have as well, which is, again, you notice a lot of these problems when I bring them up basically all stem from insecurity, partly because, you know, they're young guys or they're trying to prove themselves or whatever. So the problem is if you say to a player, like what we just said now, like, oh, you're at your best, you know, when you're kind of like left on your own or you get to say what you want to do. The problem is if someone says like, yeah, as a result, it wouldn't make sense to put him in like a team that was like, you know, all set roles and super tactical. They'll be like, no, I can do that. You know, give me a chance. Look, I'll prove I can. It's like, why bother though? Why not just find someone that fits your game? Let's find a team that you fit and that fits you. That's probably going to be the best team for you.
Now, what team might fit Stewie the best?
What do you think?
FaZe.
FaZe Clan?
Yeah.
That might be an interesting team. I do actually think in FaZe Clan, that is the dumbest part about how they constructed their team is that they...
It's like just superstars mixed together. Let's go.
Yeah, and it was basically just like, right, it's almost like that example I gave the little kids playing a football team. It's like, right, we've got 4 strikers, so who's going to be a defender and who's the right winger? And it's like, well, I don't want to do that. And it's like, yeah, but you know...
Someone has to.
You weren't even that good in Fnatic, so you're the right winger. And Rain, you're like a centre-back, mate, because you're not Nico, so there you go. It's like, you know, that really is, I'm sure, the way like these... that's the facetious version, but really that is kind of how it was, because as far as I know in FaZe, what actually happened was, and this is another area which is hilarious, because you know every pleb fan just watches FaZe Clan and the old FaZe Clan lineup, and they're like, what the fuck's Karrigan doing? It's like, Karrigan's the guy who convinced those people to take those other roles. Like, he's the guy who went to someone who won 2 majors and convinced him not to be the star player of the team that he's just been signed for megabucks. Like, you know how fucking hard a sell that is. That ain't easy. Like the idea of that is you get the guy to buy into the idea that playing a brand new Counter-Strike that's going to be less fun for him will make him win more, and and basically you have to sort of guarantee he's going to win, because if he finds out, wait a minute, I'm going to do all this stuff that I don't enjoy doing, I'm going to be the 7th best team in the world, he's probably going to say no. Like, who the fuck's in for that deal? You've got to kind of sell the guy, like, you're going to be number 1 if you do this. We're going to win the
did
major.
That talk is the best Snake Oil Salesman in all of
In a way, yeah. That's just part of being an in-game leader, though. That's one of the reasons why I always tell people, like, it's a really underrated quality, because obviously you can never know what it's like if you're in the public, but getting buy-in from your players is a big deal. And believe it or not, a guy who is very underrated for that is MSL. MSL, in all of his teams, gets people to buy into the roles he wants them to do. He even got, like, funnily enough, people know this part. That's part of how Magus sort of tanked his career, wasn't it? At the end of North, Magus wasn't that good a player, but part of the reason was MSL had convinced him, we've got to play a different brand of Counter-Strike. I've got to move some of your spots. We've got to change up what we do here. And so even though now we would all look back and go, maybe it was the wrong decision, it's actually impressive, again, that you can get a guy who's young and fiery and wants to do something to play a different way. That's a skill of a leader that is probably a bit underrated, a bit nuanced. Maybe it gets lost on people. Whereas I would say, for example, if you want a harsh version of that, I think that's actually probably an area in the last couple of years that Fallen's probably failed. Like, if you look at his teams, they look as though he hasn't always had a lot of say in who did what. And it looks to me at times as though he's just like, I won't say an in-game leader in name, because I'm sure he calls the strats, but it doesn't look like he had the full control of the team that he did for the years before they were winning, when, everyone was listening to him and everyone was 100% all in, and then they became champions.
Yeah, this kind of ties into the discussion with having a proper coach as well, to have someone that actually uses all the pieces to construct the most optimal team based on the players they actually have.
MSL even convinced Pimp to switch to op when he was an amazing rifler.
He did. I mean, I will say that was one where it was like half and half. Like, unfortunately, Pimp had like the stupid 2K angle going on of like, I could be an AWPer. Because the thing is, as a hybrid player, he was all right, actually. But he made exactly that classic mistake of not realizing that, like, if you're a very good hybrid player, that isn't the same as being a very good primary AWPer, because good luck in the game where you're hitting nothing. You've had 2 kills in the game. Your team has got just enough for like 2 rifles and an AWP, and they drop you that AWP. Like, enjoy that pressure, knowing that if you die now, you've basically lost the whole fucking round for your team. Like, we're set. Because that's what people forget. I always make this point and people always miss it, because people still believe in shit like fucking support AWPers. And concepts that I just don't even think are a thing. Like, I love the idea. People attack me over the idea support players in the thing, and then they turn around 1 second later. Yeah, Skadoodle's a support AWPer. Like, you've just said support players don't even exist, and now you're taking the weapon that is the most expensive in terms of resources, and you're saying that he's a support player using it. Like, are you some sort of Soviet agent trying to mindfuck me in a camp somewhere? And I just don't know it. Like, it's actually 1970 right now or something. What is this? Like, what sort of madness is this? Like, the cognitive dissonance is tearing me apart.
Exiting B.
Fox forever.
It's mad.
Actually, I did have a question leading from the big discussion.
Okay. Yeah.
What do you think about now that Carrigan and MSL have a new chance to, build back their reputations? How do you think Mouse and Optic can go?
Well, actually, both teams, in a way, are perfect for exactly what you just described. Because even though, like, the Mouse lineup has a lot of potential and talent, etc., obviously that lineup has never existed before. Those players are from totally disparate parts of Europe and the world, etc. Like, if he actually makes that team, it'd have to be good. It'd have to be like a legit top 5 team, I think, for him to get proper praise. But if he can do that, I guarantee that whole narrative of, like, he was the problem in FaZe, like, he wasn't good enough, that will turn around tomorrow. Because think about it, if they can get top 5, they'll be at the same level as FaZe. He will have taken some objectively worse players and brought them to the same level of FaZe. So what that will show, and I actually think it's going to happen personally, is this guy has mad skills as an in-game leader. Then on the MSL side, on a lower scale, also perfect, because everyone at this point in time is out on Optic and like, I'm sick of that team, they've never lived up to potential. Even most of the players were kind of bombs. So when you consider he got an even worse lineup in Optic, because he has Snappy and lost. Who was it they kicked out? Let me think. Who was it?
Cajun B?
Oh, Cajun B left. That's right. Yes, you're right. So he got, in theory, an even worse lineup, and already they look better. So I don't know whether these teams themselves will succeed, but I think in terms of that narrative of, like, how does the in-game leader regain, like, community and peer respect, I think they've got the right lineups to do it, because they're flawed lineups in certain ways.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I'm quite curious, because I know you've always believed in the in-game leader, and I also like, just in all games, the more strategic approach and so on. It's just with time passing by, all these good in-game leaders like Existence, these guys that we talked about, I don't know. I think Carrigan is different. I think Carrigan's approach is more, let's make the best of this player. So in Carrigan, I do believe. In MSL, I have a bit more doubts. Especially, they have good players. They have Config who can play really well.
Sure.
They can always add, switch out Snappy for another Danish guy and really make this really, really good. So I don't know at this. I mean, at this point they can't get anyone. I mean, if they get better or if one of the other Danes gets
also some young talent or something,
Yeah,
I'm sure there's some in the Danish scene.
Oh, no doubt. Like, it's too vast to have no talent at all.
But yeah, on the one thing I don't understand still from Mouse is why did they kick out Oscar, and
as far as I know, like, it's like, here's the thing about Oscar is the whole reason basically he got kicked the first time he joined after one event was that he had some sort of weird mentality to like how many hours he would practice, or whether he wanted to go to boot camps, and if you want to go to every event. And if you look at Mouse in 2018, the reason why he didn't go to that Belo Horizonte event is because he didn't want to go to Brazil for like what to him was a tier 2 tournament after a bazillion tournaments, because Mouse was one of the teams that played the most tournaments. So part of the problem is he's not a guy who's 20 who it's still super cool to travel the world with. He's a guy who's, I think he's 28 years old or something. So he's pretty old. He's got a family. To him, if you can just have a pretty cool career but without doing that, he's going to take that option. So I can't blame him entirely, but unfortunately that was behind the Mouse decision as far as I know. Like, he was either going to retire or it turned out he got the Hellraisers gig, and that was like, I think they're going to meet a lot more of his considerations in that sense. So I think, unfortunately, I agree with you. The killer for me with the Mouse lineup is I just wanted them to do a pure swap. Just bring in, like, if you're going to kick out Sticko, just bring in Carrigan, shift Christie over a little bit, and let's have the same lineup. Let's run it through Carrigan. Like, that would obviously have been amazing, but in the considering like that couldn't happen for whatever reason, like apparently Sonny just didn't want to play in the team anymore, and there's all sorts of other factors. I don't mind this lineup either. I still think it's a good one.
Yeah.
Or it's worth a chance at least.
So we have another guy fall to Angel, his blood feud of Hellraisers. Signed his contract, sir.
Well, I actually at least appreciate he'll still be playing, because obviously it would have been mad depressing if he just straight retired. So I'm even if it means on a slightly lower level, I still think it's cool. We can still watch him play. He's actually one of my favorite players to watch.
He's sick when he's on.
This just shows how. I always say there's a lot of fans who lie about their reasons for liking the game. Like, for example, the classic one is, they always claim they want like the most tactical, in-depth insight, and then if people produce that content, they don't upvote it. So similarly, people lie and claim that they like players for reasons like I do, like, a brilliant player, or what he does is amazing, or he won championship. They don't. Half the reason they like players is shit like, I like him as a person, or, I relate to him, or I saw a great interview with him. So as a result, unfortunately, Oscar has absolutely failed in that regard. He's done a terrible job marketing himself. He's a very, very private person. So you'll very rarely ever see like a real interview from him. Because he's way older and has a family, like what fucking 18-year-old kid's going to relate to that? Nobody, basically. So as a result, I can see why. Like, I don't appreciate it, because obviously I think he's a brilliant player, but I can see why to some people they wouldn't fit his kind of... he doesn't tick the right boxes to be a fan of. Whereas, like, there is also another factor, which is I think the reason why young players always get hyped is that is kind of like living vicariously through the player. Like, if you're an 18-year-old American guy and then Stu2K comes along, it's like, oh... that's what it would have been like if I'd have gotten that shot at the pros.
It's like a dream, right?
You sort of dream, yeah, exactly. It's like what you wish had happened to you. That's why you pull in for him, because you hope he makes it. Like, you hope you would have made it in the fucking Disney movie version of your life where you get into the team for some reason.
That's why I still like the older guys.
Yeah.
Like, you do realise I could literally make it'd be the most cynically written script ever, but I guarantee you I could make an esports movie that would be an international blockbuster. So are you ready for the script? Right, the first reason why this is an international blockbuster is I don't make it all about the sport. Like, there's going to be elements of the game in it where you'd see the game on the screens, but really it's all about the personal drama. So here's how it's set up, right? You've got a team. It's all these established players. You've got the old veteran who used to be the best, but now he's not quite the best, so he's kind of insecure about that. Make that whoever you like, Exactly. There's many. You can fill in all the names here. I'd be basing some of it off real life as well, don't worry. You've got, the in-game leader who, he was a great in-game leader. He's been with the org a long time, so they're keeping him. But does everyone listen to him anymore? Some people maybe question him, You got, like, the young player who's, like, doesn't get the respect, he's having to play other roles. He hasn't yet had the chance to come into his own. And then what happens is one of their players we'll make it that in this version, because it's drama, it's hype, you know, we'll make it that he gets banned. He gets VAC banned. So they literally just lose a player at the end of the contract and they don't have a replacement. So what happens is, to take some time out to cool off, they're playing a bunch of pugs. They're just playing matchmaking, a bunch of pugs. I would make the joke and say they're playing Face It, but you know, I don't want Face It branded in this movie, so we won't. It's not Face It they're playing.
Just the SCA. No.
And then, not them either. And they're playing Brand X generic pug service. So when they're playing there, right, they play and they happen to just get matched with some random kid, and they play and they're like, "Hey kid, you're pretty good." And he's like, "Oh really? Thanks, because I only began a month ago." And they're like, you know, like out of the game, they're like, "What the fuck? No way! Only a month in? Oh, he has potential." And then they invite him for like a trial or some shit, you know. And then obviously he passes the trial with like flying colours, you know. He's fragging out. He's all of the. And they're like, and the old in-game leader's like, "I think I could mould him into a good player." You know, the old great players are thinking like, "Oh, let's recruit him anyway because he wants to keep his own status." Like, and then the movie obviously starts, and then in the movie, you know, first land he goes to, he B-rabbits out of 8 Mile, you know, he chokes, it's going bad. He's like, "Oh shit, I don't know if I can hack it," you know, whatever. But then I don't know what had happened. I guess in this scenario, we'll make it even more cynical, shall we? He goes to like a fucking bar or something, and then like Heaton's in the bar, and he's like, "Oh hey, how's it going in the tournament?" or some shit. And he's like, gives him some like words of wisdom, you know, gives him like the moment, the heart to heart, where it tells him like, you know, "This is bigger than you, man. You've got to..." I don't know, whatever the fuck he says to him. You know how movies in Hollywood are. And then obviously, we all know what happens here. He
Already
goes
know
back.
what jerseys they're going to wear for him.
He goes back, and obviously, exactly. He goes back, he carries, he hits the fucking sick shot in the 1v1. Literally, they're lifting him up on his shoulders, and then that's like the end of the first movie. And this is going to be a trilogy, by the way. There's another movie after that. Second movie is all the drugs, the sex, the rock and roll. Shit gets out of control. You know, they get arrogant. Third movie's the comeback. You know, like this will be a whole series. Exactly.
The first movie sounds like Titan when they had Kaylee.
Yes, exactly. Because obviously the reason why that movie would, I guarantee you that movie would be massive. Because first of all,
I would watch.
First of all, kids are vaguely into like that, like general games, Fortnite, etc. enough that they would watch the movie, you know. Secondly, as you've noticed, I purposely fit in loads of like cliched Hollywood tropes that we know 100% work. Like, you know, they hit a little button in your brain that feels good. And then thirdly, because it would be the ultimate wish fulfillment, wouldn't it? Like, if you're a pleb who's ever played Counter-Strike, like we all were once upon a time, of course you'd watch that. Like, in a way, it would be mad compelling. You'd be into it. I would be. I'd watch this movie.
What if the studio comes to you? Okay, this Obi-Wan Kenobi person is going to be played by Ninja.
I'm out. I'm not watching that movie.
Sadly, that probably is the casting. Like, you're right. What would happen is he'd come in and then Ninja, and he'd go like, "How did you make it when you won the..." Checks notes, Streamer Showdown 17 in 20. He's like, "Well, you know, it was tough because a lot of people said after my placing in Streamer Showdown 16 that I was done, but I told them, don't ever count out Ninja, motherfucker." And then, you know, and then I put on that headband. Exactly.
And along comes Dr. Disrespect. "You can't beat the back-to-back champ."
Yeah, exactly. He'd have a cameo. He'd be in the movie as well. Don't worry, we bring all the big names
all
in.
the people.
Yeah. You know, Pokemon would be in there as a love interest. You know, once the player starts doing really well, he starts dating her.
Well,
you know.
It's going to be a French team, so yeah.
Yeah. Then obviously, you know, one of the scandals in the second movie is he's on stream, he drops an N-bomb. All of a sudden, the whole community is ablaze, you know. There's talks of whether he should be banned. He has to rehabilitate himself through the scene.
Then the third one is where they, like, bribe Valve to bring him back.
Yeah, the third one is really high fiction because in the third one, Valve actually unbans a VAC banned player and allows him to play competitive again. And that's obviously, suspension of disbelief, guys, but it's amazing because at the end he wins the major. Spoiler.
But then he gets hit by a car and dies.
The good news is as well, I would actually be able to get some real pros in it because by that point in time,
some will have retired.
Not a single Virtus Pro player will be making a living salary from playing as a pro. So I'll have them in the movie playing themselves as a team that they beat along the way. Why not? That'd be sick, wouldn't it? That'd be fucking sick. And you might think that's a little bit harsh. I'm not the one making them have bad careers. I want them to succeed, you know.
Well, they had a good career. They just had to know when to quit.
Oh, I've just realised we cast this all wrong. Obviously, the person he has to meet in the bar is Pasha, and then obviously what he does to mirror Star Wars
My
is
friend.
when he's in the 1v1, he just thinks like the biceps will always be with you, and then he wins the 1v1, doesn't he? Like that's gonna be the sickest moment ever. And then when he wins, Pasha's in the crowd. He jumps up into his big arms. He gives him that big bear hug. What a moment!
Oh, that's gonna be a feel-good moment in the movie.
Yeah, it's pretty good. You know, the sad thing is, I've actually thought of this many times before. I've just never been able to execute on this idea. But I actually do think in the future, I think I can get funding for someone to do this. But what I want to do is, when there's a joke premise like that, I want to actually get someone to do like an animated version of it, basically, and do like a series of it. So instead of just making like a joke, you could have like a little skit like that. And the idea is, it couldn't obviously be 20 minutes long. It has to be like 5 minutes long to make it reasonable for the animator. But I think it'd be really fun. Like, because the thing is, if you've ever seen when they do like Joe Rogan skits where they did like animation, it does make it a lot more viewable.
Yeah.
Like it's actually, it kind of engages your brain in a different way.
Just make it a whole anime just to annoy Monte Cristo.
If that would obviously be sick. Sadly, it does, unless you
You know how
literally
much
have like
anime
slave labor.
costs?
It's pretty hard to get anime done. Yeah, it's true. It would be baller though. I agree.
Oh,
It's a bit
let's
like
get Bone Studio to do this for us. Yeah,
it's like
here's 20 million.
actually along those lines. There's actually a really baller guy in the League of Legends community. I forget what his name is. Who he only does it in Korea because he's a Korean guy. He does them for Inven, where he actually does like anime style drawings of different scenes, and he's a really good artist. Like his likeness for the players is fucking baller. He's really like if it's Faker or something, you can see straight away that's who it is. So
Yeah, I've seen
like,
that one.
that would obviously be the dream to get someone like that, but I assume that's like a passion project for him. I don't think he just does it for money, sadly. Let me think. What would be another good topic?
Did you guys see where the average LCS salary is hit 300,000? This is confirmed by
Really?
Chris Gleeman.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
Yes, this was done by Chris.
Thing is, I really don't like average as a number. I'd like to know what's the median, because I mean average has double lift appearance and impact.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, I hadn't thought of that. Yeah,
by
the
so
real
much.
problem there, mate, is that like Hooney and a few other people's contracts, which will be like $1 million fucking dollars or something. Yeah, the problem with the average one there is it's like the old joke, isn't
inflated.
it? Is if if all four of us here are in the same room with Bill Gates, then we all have an average, net worth of like fucking 90 billion or something, don't we? Like it doesn't make any, well, it'd be like 20 billion, but you know what I mean? Like it doesn't make
But
any sense
still,
because
like,
individually we all have $50 and he has the 90 billion, doesn't he? Like
But
It's still
across
a lot.
all these players, like that's like
It's still
pretty
very
nice.
impressive.
it's not
Right?
bad. What that really means is that there are actually a decent amount of big contracts that are probably averaging it out. Because put it this way, it's gotten a lot better and definitely LEC's improved. But if you go back like 4 years ago, my God, it was depressing because there used to be some amazing EU pros who were making like a tenth of what Bjergsen makes, basically. Even if they were as good as
Nearly
him.
They were near his skill level as well, which is sad.
I've got a question for you. So today I published my article, which was like my top 10 players of last year. Because here's the funny thing is, I don't even think it's that big a deal to publish it this late, because it's not like last year's going anywhere. It still all happened the same way. True, we don't remember it as well, so that's one knock you could give against it.
Yeah,
But the problem was, I would have done it like 3 months ago, obviously, but I just didn't get around to it. But then I wanted to have something on record. 'Cause it's all well and good going, well, I would have had this guy. It's like, who gives a fuck? Unless you actually put your money where your mouth is. It doesn't really count. So I did my top 10. Now, for people who don't know, I'm not at all someone who thinks people have to agree with me. Like, part of me doesn't agree with myself, because obviously when you sometimes you're weighing up like, should this guy be number 4, should be number 5, and really you can go either way. You have to pick, right? Well, I've got to pick one of them, so what am I going to come down on? What criteria am I going to decide upon? So I actually personally think when you're doing it as tenuous a list like this, like in a team game, you're deciding who the 10 best individual players were. There are a million angles you can go on that. There are a lot of players. Like, even though, yeah, I would say it's very hard to make a case for anyone other than simple to be number 1, for example. Aside from that, there's quite a lot of wiggle room. Depending on how you judge criteria, you can go a lot of different ways, and a lot of them would be legit. So how about you guys? Obviously, I'm going to go ahead and assume all 3 of you wouldn't have an identical top 10 to me. It'd be pretty weird if you did. So Are there players you would put higher or lower in reasons? Are there players that aren't even on my top 10 that you would have had? What about let's do a few each. So go on, Jockeys, give me one that would be different for you, either higher or lower, or different player entirely on the list. Is someone I missed off that you would put on yours?
I'm surprised you put Naf fourth. I would have him 7 or 8th.
Sure.
Ish.
I'll give you a reason for that. So one of the reasons...
But he performed excellently.
Sure. Well, that was one of the reasons, actually, that he was so high up. Is like, first of all, his team was so good that surely whoever I think the best players on the team must have been very good as well, right? What are the odds that they were that good and their best player was a bomb? Not very high. Then you've got to add in a lot of people on that list probably played less maps than Naf, if I looked it up. Probably didn't go to as many finals as Naf did, because obviously his team made a lot of big finals, like 6 or 7 finals over the whole year, had many top 4. So as a result, even though there might have been players who had better stats, I think if you average all the factors out, he did have a very good year overall. I know what you mean, like... I made this point in the article. One of the weird things about him as a player is, even though he has a lot of highlight clips, when you watch the clips themselves, they don't always look that crazy. Like, he is the guy where he just shoots you and you die. Like, that might sound like a frivolous thing to say, but there's been a lot of players like that over the years. Like, I mean, I would even count Magisk as that, by the way. Like, Magisk has amazing spray, so if he has to spray 20 bullets, you're going to see his skill. But if he just kills 2 people coming around the corner by spraying them in the chest, that doesn't look that crazy, but it's also not that easy to get 2 kills like that. So, as bizarrely, it sounds counterintuitive, but it doesn't look as good, but in a way that makes it impressive in itself, and it doesn't look crazy.
It's still going to be there, you know?
Sure. So that was one reason I had him there.
Certainly.
Let's do a free-for-all here. Anyone can suggest a name or say what they would do.
Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't have Twists in there.
It's because, unfortunately, his peak was like pretty brief. Like when he was super godlike, it was pretty brief. And if you looked earlier in 2018, because here's another thing that people probably didn't think about, is it's all well and good remembering the year, but you're not going to be able to remember that well. I went back and watched POVs and watched some games and tried to ask, like, for example, if it was a player where I had a tough time figuring out where to put him, I would watch a few of his big games and go, right, now I have a better sense. Now I remember kind of what he was in there. So the thing with Twists was, because his team was so good and some of the others was very good as well, he did actually have some tournaments where he just sort of cruised. Like, he didn't do that well. And obviously when he got injured at the end of the year, his numbers went down big time. So I agree. If you want to just look, like if we were picking one tournament or one match, like someone's peak level, he was absurdly good. The problem is over the whole year, for me at least, I thought he wasn't quite there enough for me,
Yeah, it's just the way the mind remembers it, right?
I agree. If you go back to like the autumn, he definitely was killing it.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Sen?
The thing is, I don't think I could put the player I like in the top 10, and it's against what you did. So I think the biggest difference from your list to HLTV is that you have less Astralis.
Yes, they actually had, I think they had, so they had all 5 in the top 20, and I think they had 4 in the top 10.
Yeah, so Magisk was 7, Glaive was 8, and Zipnik was 13.
That's so skewed.
So which one are you picking, Zipniks or Glaive?
However, I was going to pick Zipniks because simply, I mean, you could make the same argument for Glaive, but it's just, I guess there is scrims there, which is also kind of supportive sometimes, but I just think that there's no other player like Zipniks, and there are other players like almost everyone on this list.
Yes.
Except maybe Simple. But it's, I mean, if already Astralis has 4 top players in the HLTV top 10, I can't put the 5th there. It just seems ridiculous. So I'm a bit conflicted in this.
I'll give you my reasoning for that then, because I know what you mean. Because, for example, if you notice, there's not a single in-game leader on my list, excluding Nico, obviously, because that doesn't really count in that sense.
That doesn't count for...
And there's also no support. Basically, everyone on my list is a star player.
Yeah.
Now, the problem is, on the HLTV in August, yeah, that's not the case at all. As I said, they had all 5 Astralis players. But the problem with that is... And actually, I guess I didn't really outline this as well in my criteria. Maybe I should have added this, actually. I actually essentially think a list like this basically is supposed to be top 10 star players of the year. Like, if I'm being honest, like, I don't really think... Like, This is something I did a few years back. In 2014, I think it was, I did a top 20 players of all time list. And I did put, like, this is 2014, remember, so it's not going to be as ridiculous back then as it sounds now, but I did actually have existence in my list. Now, the reason why is because at the time I was trying to do what most people do now, which is I just take everything I know about the player into account. So at the time, he was the best tactical in-game leader we'd had. So I was like, actually, I think he had a bad impact on the game. But when I actually look at these lists now, really, if I had to like phrase the title of the list as accurately as possible, it would be top 10 star players who played enough maps and against enough top tier opposition. What was the last detail? Oh, fuck, I forgot one aspect that they'd be in there.
In important tournaments?
Something like that, yeah. And it'd say individual star players. Like, it wouldn't be how you play as a teammate or if you do it. So, for example, one of the factors that means Zipnix wouldn't get on there is one of the things he's really good at is supportive play and winning clutches.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is, if we're talking about best individual players, that's not really that big a factor towards that, Like, he's a fantastic team player, obviously, and a fantastic sport player, yes. Fantastic clutch player. But if we're just looking at, like, individual players, he's just not that type of player. So, like, put it this way, if this was a football list, yeah, the list would be nearly all strikers and midfielders. But you know what? If you go and look at a list of contender for best player of the year, best player in the world, it's nearly all going to be strikers and midfielders in football.
Yeah.
It's not going to be many goalies or support players or defenders. Like, you'd have to do an exceptional job to do that. Like, obviously, it sometimes will happen. Paolo Maldini or fucking, Oliver Kahn, these classic examples, but that's going to be like the rare outliers. So Zipnix has a chance to do it. My problem is I couldn't put Zipnix in because I actually also think the reason his numbers are so crazy. Like, the big problem is this.
No
one else has addressed this, but everyone in Astralis has mad inflated numbers. Everyone.
Yeah.
Glaive has, Zipnix has. These guys are having career best numbers. So that's either the biggest coincidence ever, or they've leveled up massively, or them being so insane as a collective team boosted the stats. I personally come down on the last one.
Seeing
so as a result,
isn't an anime, it's the last one.
So let's say he had the same stats, but he played on North. Hey, now we can have this discussion. Now maybe he would be one of the best players in the world if he could do that and be on North. Now, to be fair, I don't think you'd even get the same stats playing the same way, though. You probably have to do more in the game. So actually, even the eye test would probably display more. I can see why you'd want him included. I agree. If this was just like 10 players where it's like we're looking at every factor that can be in the game, yeah, you could make a very strong case for him as a player. Because, for example, here's how I would show you how valuable a player he can be. If we had to do some kind of like a draft of players, so think about how a fantasy draft works.
Yeah.
And the whole point here is that we're just picking players who are going to still play in their separate teams, but we're going to aggregate the scores. So if you know how those drafts work, in the first round, Jerkies gets the first pick, so he takes Simple. And then Andreas gets the second pick, and let's say he picks Nico. Like, these are like slam dunks, you can't say these are bad picks. No. But here's the thing. If I'm third in that list, and there's 4 of us, I might actually take Zipnix.
Yep.
Or I might take an in-game leader there. And the reason why is because if I'm fourth to pick, and if you know the way those drafts tend to work, the person who's last in the first round picks first in the next round. If I can take Zipnix, and now I can basically pick the 4th best star player in the world, so that might be NAF, or it might be someone like that, Electronic. If I have Electronic and Zipnix, I've got a fucking pretty sick foundation for a team immediately. You've just got a star player. Like, if you're going to go the route that most people would, you're going to pick Simple, and then, next player come down. Right now I'm going to take, I'll make one up, Config, and then, right, I'm going to go down. Now I'm going to take, who have we got left? I guess I'll take, and I'll throw someone in randomly, Apex here. Your problem is when you get to the bottom end of your team, which at the moment is going to be your in-game leader and support, you're going to be left with the trash. They're all the good ones are gone. So... Yeah. That's like a weird example, but I think that shows that, like, yeah, you can be a player who stats-wise isn't amazing, but has insane value.
Yeah, I mean...
It's the same reason why, some players...
That was exactly my argument.
Yeah, I would agree.
But if I do think of your criteria, I mean, I cannot kick out Crims or Guardian of this list.
It's hard, yeah.
His 1vx's are insane, though.
Yeah.
It's like
obviously it's Pledge Master, but still.
Somewhere, like, I believe it was 2014 or something, across all of the year when he was in a 1v free or 1v4 situation, he had like an insane win rate on that one, like above 50%. It's like, how do you win that much?
I think it probably wasn't above 50%, but I could agree it was probably high. Like, I think that would
It
be
was
impossible to be.
Absolutely high, monstrously high.
Let me think. Do you have anyone you'd suggest, Andreas? By the way, a good point actually that Zen brought up there is that's the other thing people never do on any list when they comment in Reddit, is they love suggesting people who should be on the list. They never like to say who should be off the list. Have you noticed that? Like, remember, as you're saying, it's not that I'm adding Zipniks. It's like, right, who are we kicking? Guardian, Crims. These are pretty fucking good players. It's hard to kick them, you know, that's the thing. So what really happens, I'll give you the translation of what most fans are really saying, is they just want their favourite player to get some credit, which is legit. But the point is, that's not what a top 10 list is for. Top 10 list is, you know, with the top 10 best players. So, Andreas, do you have a name that would be on your top 10 that I don't have? Surely.
Not one that I can think of at the moment. The first one that struck me
What
was...
about this? Shall I throw out some names that could have made the list or would have been in the rest that I didn't have on there, and we'll see if anyone wants to pick? Yeah, go on. Give me what you were going to say first, though.
Yeah, I was going to switch places with Cold Sarah and Oscar and put Cold Sarah higher. Because I
could see that.
Because I think... Well, I think both players has been fairly inconsistent in 2018, but Cold Sarah has been way more consistent than Oscar. Oscar's level has been wavering way too much.
Yeah.
Just based on that basis.
I'd agree. On that criteria, I would agree with you, mate. The reason I didn't have him that high up is because MIBR just didn't get deep in tournaments very often. And so as a result, he just didn't have the chance and the number of maps and the amount of maps against the top opponents to really like show me that he's a better player. Like, I would agree. You know what? If I actually had to pick who's a better player, ignoring other factors, just like my gut feeling, I would probably still have picked Cold Zero as better than Oscar. Like, I think Cold Zero actually, and this just shows this is why you can never really win in esports. It's like you don't actually win by your opinion being vindicated. What happens is when everyone else starts to agree with you, they agree with you because it made sense in their brain. And because it made sense in their brain, it's now their idea. So even though I told people for years, you do know you're all overrating Cold Zero, right? Like, he's not like the best player to ever play CSGO. Like, a lot of it's like his team structure, and he's a very good player, but he has key pieces with him. Well, what's mad is, in 2018, he had some tournaments that are worse, sure, but he had a lot of tournaments where he was just as good as he was the previous years, and yet everyone else was like, who gives a fuck about Cold Zero? It's like, you were the guys who gave a fuck about him. You never shut the fuck up for the last 2 years, so I actually think he was probably an underrated player, believe it or not, last year. For the whole year, if you look overall, you know? Yeah. Like, what about this? I'll read off some of the names I didn't have in my top 10. You tell me if you would have any of these. So, Magisk is obviously a very hot button one. I think a lot of people would probably disagree with me on that one. That one, by the way, I'll give you quick criteria for that. Is like, it's tough for me to have 3 Astralis players in my top 10 here. Like, at what point does one of them not benefit from playing with 2 of the other top 10 players in the world? So, my issue there was, yes, stats-wise, I imagine Magisk probably had better stats slightly than Dupree, but the difference is, I think Dupree was more essential to the team, whereas I kind of saw some tournaments where Magisk won and he looked like he didn't even do anything. So Magisk is one, Glaive is one, Twists is one, Zipniks is one, OllieJ, Sonny, Automatic, Rain, Rops, and Valde. That was who was on the top 20 that I didn't have. So is there anyone you would pick off that list and you would like to put in your top 10?
I mean, it would probably be Zipniks, as we talked about earlier. But even then, it's the whole thing, who you're going to replace.
Sure.
So I don't really think I can replace anyone, actually. Yeah, maybe Oscar. Yes. Or Cold Sarah. I might replace them with someone.
Key thing is, like, you can absolutely replace anyone you want. It's your criteria, you know. What people don't seem to appreciate, and I did try and outline this in the criteria section, was like, that's what people don't do that I think you should do with every list, is before you do the list, you explain, here's my criteria, and here's what I choose. Because obviously part of picking a list is, you have to value one thing over another. You know, when there's 5 possible factors, you can't take them all into account because what if some of them go against each other? So the factors I picked would be different from the factors someone else picked. And in fact, as I alluded to, I could have picked different factors. Like, luckily, I've done this for long enough that I've kind of, you know, thought a lot about what my factors are and how I've nailed them down. But I could totally see if, like, say someone commissioned me to do this article and they said, right, but I want you to do it from the perspective of who had the best you know, like fucking peak tournament. Well, there we go. I'd have definitely out of a different 10 than the 10 I picked, and it'd be a different order, you know. So I think there's valid reasons. Like, here's the thing, on a list like this, I'm not mad at almost any of these players that people put in. I do think factors like having 4 Astralis players in the top 10, it just goes so against my criteria. I don't like it. But individually, I understand why they tried to make a case for each of them. It's just that I think you should have like a collective principle that sort of kicks into play there. What about you, Zen? Would you have anyone else in your top 10?
I mean, I think it would be Zipnix, and the next one, unfortunately, would be Glaive. So for the same reason, basically.
I get it. And by the way, if you want to add in the criteria of let's consider, yes, we're speculating a little bit, but like, you know, other factors like being an in-game leader, setting the team up, inventing strats, innovating. There you go. Immediately Glaive's in the top 10, right?
Yeah.
Sure. And you know what? Like I mentioned, I obviously told you my theory. I think the numbers are inflated, but you still can't argue the numbers for Glaive are bonkers for a tactical in-game leader. Like those are impossible.
Yeah.
I mean, in my opinion, they really are impossible. You know, like they're even just as a hyperbole, they're incredible. Yeah, like that. Just individually, what's mad is if I'd actually made a top 20, because I only made top 10. I actually do think when I got to the end of the top 20, I would have had to think hard about people like Glaive, because it's like they do still have pretty mad numbers. I still probably, based on my criteria, would have come down no, but I wouldn't be mad at someone who includes them. I just couldn't believe they had Glaive number 8 on the HLTV one. I thought that was wild. Like I don't know what world. I mean, I can diss HLTV. I don't like him very much, but I don't know in what world anyone thinks Glaive was actually better performing than, you know, Guardian, Coldzera, Oscar, a whole bunch of players that for me were like, these were sometimes MVP level players.
Yeah.
What's like a more general topic? We'll do this as the last topic because we've got a good run of time under our belts. So throw anything out there and we'll pick one and we'll do it as the last topic. Let's see what's going on. I've got a question for you. So it starts in a few days. IEM Sydney. And for anyone who doesn't know, Astralis is skipping the tournament. So no, just picking Astralis to win. But out of all the teams that are left there, there's also no ENTs. I'll read the teams out very quickly. There's FaZe Clan, Fnatic, Team Liquid, MIBR, Mouse Sports, Ninjas in Pyjamas, NRG, Renegades, Heroic, Big with a Stand-In, E United, Vici Gaming, MVP, Boot Dreamscape, Greyhound Gaming, and Chiefs. So an interesting field. Some very good teams, some middling teams, some teams you would expect nothing from. Right, let's start out here. Each person has to tell me who their pick to win the tournament is. And by the way, again, as I hope people appreciate on this particular show, I'm not really doing like my persona on this show. Like, I'm not going to hard flame people if they pick someone I don't like or whatever. Like, that's fair. So pick whoever you want. So Zen, start me off. Who would you pick to win this tournament? Who's your pick? And it can be a crazy one if you want. It doesn't have to be like the actual favourite, just who you think will win.
I think FaZe. I mean, I think the logical pick is Team Liquid, but I mean, that would be, you know,
sure.
Easy.
Agreed.
So I think FaZe, I mean, they're bound to have, you know, Nico go off or Olaf go off. I think they have a lot of pieces that can really help them win the tourney. So I think that's it's not 100%. Obviously, they're always up and down.
Sure.
They could also, you know, go out first round.
Of course.
Well,
Yeah.
not first round because they play Chiefs, but they play NRG second.
You
so.
never know.
They could fail to make playoffs, sure.
But they you know, they could lose to NRG very easily as well.
They might play with their eyes closed and lose to Chiefs.
Yeah. But I do think they have the, you know, the highest highs. So let's go.
Okay. Right, Andreas, who are you going to pick, mate?
I have to go with Team Liquid. First, as Sen said, it's the most logical, and I really want this lineup to actually work out. Ever since Stewie moved to Liquid, it's more based on feelings, to be honest. But I really want this team to work. I think it's gonna be really fun to watch.
No, I get it, and also it would just make the scene so much more exciting if they won a big event. Like if they win this event, I know Astralis isn't there, but like, you know what, there's still some good teams there. It would mean something. Like at that point, you could start to believe in them next time they play Astralis in the final, right?
Yeah, it was devastating to watch the last major. The storyline, even if they had lost against Astralis in the final or won, the storyline would have been so great.
Of course, yeah.
Although we got an amazing meme song out of it.
Yeah,
Sure.
fair enough.
No, but what people forget as well is that's the part people forget. You've nailed it there, Andreas, which is even though I personally do think they probably would have lost it probably would have been boring like all the others. The key thing is because the only tournament before that they'd played was the iBuyPower Masters and they had beaten Astralis in the final, the actual hype for that final would have been huge.
Yeah.
Like that would have been a mad marquee matchup. So even if Astralis actually won the final easily, you know, a part of a game isn't even just the game, it is the expectations and, you know, the thoughts going. Like, for example, when one of the games of the year already for me was the Na'Vi versus Ents game from Star Series. I know you didn't see it, Andreas, but basically a rematch of the semi-final of the major. And that's exactly why it was so hyped, because everyone wanted to see that match played out again. Everyone did, of course, because you wanted to know, was it a fluke Ents beat them? Could Na'Vi come back? What will happen when Simple players knowing that, you know, it's like the actual storylines were almost better than the game. Now, the game itself actually ended up having some amazing shit in it, but the storylines alone got you super pumped. Right, who are you going to pick then, Jerkies?
I'm going to pick Renegades.
Okay.
Renegades?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ooh,
They
What
impressed
reason?
me way too many times. And with their coaching, they've improved so much. I do believe in them. You know, it's home turf. Let him go.
There you go.
Like that's actually, believe it or not, Andreas. I know at the major you must have seen them, but that's not actually as crazy as that would have sounded like 4 months ago as a prediction. Because if you just watch them in any random game in a tournament, they legitimately look like one of the best teams in the world. Their only issue is they've obviously never done it yet. Like they haven't ever come through and won the big tournament. They haven't, you know, performed like that in a big final or something. So they would still have to clear those hurdles. But I'd agree with you, Juggies. It's not unreasonable to think this could happen. Like
By the
if
power
I actually,
of the Shui, it will happen.
if you look at some of these teams here, obviously teams like Fnatic have way bigger names. I would pick Renegades as a team with a better chance to win this tournament than Fnatic.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, super impressed by them at the major. They played so great. I was really surprised.
They basically did the same thing at the next tournament, Star Series. Like they beat FaZe in a best of 3. They had a whole bunch of series where they beat Nape. They actually looked pretty legit all the way around. It's just like I say, I just don't know yet if they've cleared like the pressure hurdle, because obviously you can never know that till you're in that situation. I probably would also pick Team Liquid. I think for this one though, it's a pretty wide open tournament. Like obviously the new Mouse Sports team's there.
You still have Nip, who can
Would love to
actually,
see that.
become a dark horse.
I don't know if Nip can win the event, but they can obviously
Pretty dark
definitely
horse.
do damage. Yeah, because the most interesting detail about Nip is it's funny how many people who do analysis don't mention the actually interesting details when they analyze the game. I think part of it's because they get too caught up in the tactics. Because the thing about Nip that you should always mention to set the game up is what makes them fun to watch is they have like a like 50 to 60% win rate on almost every single map. And so as a result, is it any wonder that they're so up and down? Because that means that they can lose their map pick and win your map pick. Like, it's actually bonkers. So it means that they actually are one of the most fun teams to just throw into a field and let them cause havoc. Like, they're probably not going to win the tournament. Like, that kind of inconsistency is going to mean you probably won't win. But it means that they'll win a series they shouldn't. They'll lose a series they shouldn't. They'll win a map they shouldn't. They'll win a map. It actually makes them really fun to watch. So I agree, in a field as wide open as this, they could definitely do some damage. Like, they could knock out, like they could knock out Team Liquid and suddenly someone else wins the tournament. And who knows, maybe, just maybe,
If it's in the final.
one last time, NIP Magic. One last. I know it shouldn't be possible now,
That's
right? There is
right.
no Exist, there's no Freiburg.
There is
Surely,
always a reserve
surely.
in that Get Right Forest clinical duo tank. There's got to be some
Sure.
magic left in that bounce.
That's what people
The
don't
greatest of all
realise.
time and get right.
What people don't seem to realise is that cycle actually tends to happen for every great player
Yeah.
and team,
Still
which is
one
what.
last time, right?
Yeah, when you've been on top and you fall off, even someone who hated you starts to think, I'd still like to see him one more time, give him one last run. And so what's mad is sometimes, like, that's actually the reason why it's funny. One of the reasons I'm always very complimentary towards Virtus Pro is I was never a Virtus Pro fan. Like, almost every time I was a fan of the other team, Fnatic, TSM, NIP. And so the reason I actually respect Virtus Pro incredibly is I know what it took to beat that team. And I know that when that team every now and then would come along and spank those big names I'm talking about, I was like, holy fuck. So it's like, in a mad way, as long as you're not an arsehole, you can actually gain respect for people you weren't even a fan of. And eventually, especially when they fall on hard times, you almost start pulling from them, don't you? You almost say, I wish they were back. I definitely don't wish Freiburg was back on an IP, but you get the sentiment. Right up until that point, you get what I was saying. Right, what about this then?
We're going to bring him back for it.
Let's do a dark horse for the tournament then. Now, I'll define the criteria here so none of you fall into what I call the James Bardolph trap, where what James Bardolph did was pick the number one ranked team at a tournament as the dark horse. They won the tournament, and then he said, my dark horse won the tournament.
It's not
so
a dark horse.
We're not going to do that. We're not doing that. So I'll go ahead and tell you right now, I'm going to make it interesting by doing this. I'm banning you all from picking FaZe Clan or Team Liquid. So who's the dark horse? You can pick any other team. And for me, dark horse just means like you shouldn't win the tournament. You're not a favourite. You're not like a main contender. Yeah. But it's like you have some quality about you that means like there's an outside chance it could happen. Like if you just struck fire or you got amazing at one match, it could just happen. Like the Cinderella run. Who would it be? We'll go the other way around then. Jerky, start us off. Who would be your dark horse?
Ooh,
some would say you've already picked it with Renegades, but do you want to pick another one for us?
Well, if I do have to pick that one, I'm going to pick MIBR.
MIBR, okay. What are your reasons for that?
It might just click. Like, it's been long enough, I feel, from them that if it's going to happen, it's going to happen now, else it's not going to happen anywhere soon. Sure.
I could definitely see that reasoning. And plus, the reason why actually they're quite a good pick for a cheeky dark horse is obviously nothing that they've done this year suggests they should win the tournament. But half the reason they're confusing is you look at the lineup on paper and you go, of course they should be able to win. Why wouldn't they? Look at those players. If you look at those players on paper, you say, surely they'd turn it around this tournament. I keep thinking that every time I see the lineup.
Right?
Of course. Obviously, it's funnier if they don't, but that's just my own personal reasons. Yeah, exactly. Right, Andreas, who's your dark horse? Who do you want to pick for a little bit of a wild one?
I'm going to pick Mouse Sports, actually.
Okay, what are your reasons?
I mean, not bad players on the team. If they can get it together, Kerrigan with his leadership ties the whole thing together. Chris J has his wonderful form, and Rops goes back to his star player style. Just pops off.
That's also another area, by the way, where I could absolutely see Kerrigan again getting mad props, is if you saw Rops towards the end of the last Mouse Sports lineup, he'd become like a very humdrum player. Like he just looked okay. So if he can actually like make him a star player and like one of the better players in the world, that's not only a cool storyline, it'll show he's done something.
Yeah, for sure.
Come on then, Zen. Who are you picking?
It's more like a pitch black horse, but in RG, I think. I mean, if you ignore the major,
it's not a bad one.
Major qualifier, at the main, like the whatever they call it now, and Star Series. I mean, they do get good placings.
Sure.
They won stuff. So
and they beat some teams in series. Yeah.
Yes.
They won Summit. They won the minor. They went 3-0 or something in the main qualifiers. So it's hard. I think it's very hard. There's a lot of teams here, like Fnatic just beat them. Even obviously FaZe, Team Liquid, etc. But I think they could do it. If 1%, I don't know, 5% chance maybe.
I'll give you a couple of reasons they could win the tournament. So one, here's the thing. Because they basically did the exact same move that Team Liquid did, which is you take out the supportive element, so Fogley in this case instead of Taco, and you replace him with someone who used to be a star player, so Stewie to Team Liquid, Tarek to this team. Because they did basically the same move, I feel like people have missed the premise that the same factor that applies to Team Liquid applies to NRG. NRG is a pretty skilled team. Now, sure, Difference is Nitro's much more skilled than Daps. But if you look like at the other four, they got some pretty good players. Like the actual average skill level on that team is pretty impressive. Then you add in, like you say, they already have some experience. It's not like they've never been to finals or never been to semis. Tarek's won a fucking major. Like they've got some alright experience. And then the last reason, and this is actually a mad underrated reason, but a reason that they absolutely could win this tournament, is they actually have played all of the maps. They actually were I think the stat was that at Star Series, I believe they won on every single map. I think they won on all 7 maps, or they just played all 7. One of those two, and like had very close games on the ball. Like if you really play all the maps in the map pool, that, first of all, that means you can match up against anyone. And then secondly, if you know how their coach, I'm a pet, works, like he's one of those guys who wants to know what map you're playing so you can study the demos. Well, that means if you play all 7 maps, you can do what he used to do in the old CLG, which is how they got some upsets, which is that you purposely leave up a map that's strong for the opponent because you know he's going to pick it. And then because you know he's going to pick it, you can actually spend the whole night studying the demos because you know he's going to, yeah. So that's literally what he did to snap like Gambit's streak on Cobblestone and, you know, a bunch of stuff like that. So that's really what he did. In a counterintuitive way, it's kind of genius. Like there is something to that. So it's not as crazy as it sounds. Like I agree it's a dark horse pick. Like no one would be picking them like top 3 to win the tournament, but it's not impossible. That's actually why this feels pretty exciting to me.
Yeah.
Let me see. Who would my pick be then?
Freiburg.
I guess my pick probably should be Mouse Sports, because I kind of do feel like if everything clicks, they could just win the tournament. But actually, I think almost every pick you guys have made isn't terrible. It's not bad. Like
I wasn't going to say VG or something like absurd, you know? Like,
yeah, those are a bit too. That's pushing the ball out a little bit far. Yeah.
Far? I mean, don't even know if I can see the barrel.
Do you think Fnatic has a chance?
Not a big one. Like the big problem with their team is it's very rare that you know who's going to turn up and actually have a good game.
Yeah.
And then you add in, they don't really have like a super great tactical system or anything, so you rely more upon individuals. And then thirdly, their map pool's in a bit of a mess. So I would go ahead and speculate. This isn't inside info. I would speculate. I don't think that actually they have super high morale in that team. Like I think they kind of know they're painted into a corner because they've signed 3-year contracts with Crimson JW. Broland's brand new, so you're not going to kick him. Twist, you finally got him into the team, so you're probably not going to exist for some reason they can never let go of. So I don't think they feel like they have anywhere they can go, like a player to replace. So I think they're just going to ride this lineup out for a while. And here's the thing, I would say more realistically, their chances are like make top 4. That's like something that could realistically happen. Win the tournament, that's hard because it's like hard to see how they're going to beat teams like Team Liquid. Actually, a whole bunch of teams here. It's hard to see how they're going to beat some of them in like a full best of 3.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't think they're terrible though. I definitely don't think they're like a bad team. I just think that they don't have like a great peak. I don't think they can hit it that often anyway. I think they're just like an okay team basically. They're like if you want to do the top 10 in terms of actual ability, not like rankings, they're probably like, you know, 7th or 8th or something. That's probably fair. Like there's teams that might be below them in rankings that are better, but there's also definitely teams that they would beat them that are above them for good reason.
Yeah.
This video was generously supported by Dean Tanglis, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, Butt Pounder 420, JDubs, Chi Mao, Daniel Olivar, Jiangheng Lu, OllieJ, Tobias Bernasconi, NateDOhDoubleG, Alexander Rao, and as always, a special thanks goes out to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Now, do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my work? Maybe you want to ask me a question for my monthly AMA? Do you want teasers for who the guests are on my upcoming content? Maybe you want to take part in a monthly esports discussion with yours truly. Well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.